Today I am back in Cleveland, Tennessee for the second day now, and this video today is going to be a true crime video from here in this area. This is going to be another unsolved crime, as this one happened in 1991, and a 22-year-old young man was found murdered inside of his home. It's now been 31 years since this brutal murder took place, and to date no one has been arrested and no one has been charged for the murder of Stacy Dillon. Real quick before we get into this video, I just wanted to take just a quick moment and give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this video today, My Patriot Supply. I'm sure by now all of you have gone to the grocery store and you've seen that the shelves are empty. Because of these global food shortages, it's common to feel uncertain about the future, and there's no better way to be prepared than with long-term food emergency storage kits. And I have partnered up with a company called My Patriot Supply who sells Ready Hour products. And whether you're currently not prepared or if you've bought Ready Hour before, you can go to prepwithbamamike.com and you can save $150 right now on a 3-month emergency food kit. You'll get meals for breakfast, lunch, dinner, drinks, snacks, the works, and then you'll be prepared when the unthinkable happens. Again, if you go to prepwithbamamike.com and you want something different other than that 3-month supply, you can just click on that My Patriot Supply logo at the top left corner from prepwithbamamike.com, and that'll give you full access to every product that they have on their site using my discount that they created for my subscribers. But like I said, you have to start at prepwithbamamike.com. Once again, a huge shout out to My Patriot Supply for sponsoring this video today. These guys are awesome. Amy and I have bought from them for years, so go check it out. I'm sure you'll find something you enjoy. Now, into today's video. Back in 1991, 22-year-old Stacy Dillon lived right here in this home with his mother, Judy. I can't find a lot online about where Stacy's father was at this time, but I know he wasn't in the picture. And Stacy and his mother lived here together by themselves. Stacy did have a stepfather named Glenn Darnell. He and Stacy's mother had gotten married and they were separated at the time of the story, but they were kind of like on their way, working their way back together again. Stacy and his stepfather clashed quite a bit. They didn't get along at all. It had been reported that Glenn Darnell had been abusive to both Stacy and Judy in the past, which is suspected as to why they were separated. But in March of 1991, Judy Dillon fell and she broke her knee. She went into the hospital to have knee surgery done, and she came out and she was in a lot of pain. Once she got home, she needed care. She needed someone to be there because she couldn't get up and she couldn't walk around, and her son, Stacy, was that person for her. He made her food, he helped her up to go to the bathroom, he made sure that she took all of her medicine, and he made sure that she got up and walked around as the doctor required. After a few days of Stacy doing everything for his mom, Judy, who was thinking about him, she sets it up with Glenn for her to go stay with him for the weekend, just to give Stacy a much needed break. So the time comes where it's time for Judy to leave, and Glenn comes over and he picks her up and he takes her back to his house, and they leave Stacy at home by herself for the entire weekend. Then we fast forward to Sunday on March the 17th of 1991. Judy's coming back home. So Glenn drives Judy back to their house. When they got there, Glenn got out and went up to the front door and he knocked on the door. He was trying to get Stacy to come out and help him get Judy back inside of the home. Glenn knocks and he gets no answer, and he wound up having to use a spare key that they had hidden outside of their home to get into the home. And as soon as he opens the door, he discovers a horrific scene inside. he finds Stacy Dillon laying in the living room floor, deceased. As soon as he opened the door, it was clear to him immediately that Stacy had been shot in the face, right in his cheek area. The bullet kind of like went straight through his cheek, and it wound up killing him instantly. And scattered in a few areas throughout the living room floor, they found broken pieces of Stacy's teeth that had been shattered by either the gunshot or maybe a physical altercation before the gunshot. Either way, upon seeing the scene in the home, Glenn starts panicking, and Judy can see this, that Glenn's panicking. So she asks what's wrong, and although Glenn doesn't want to tell her, he has to. He tells her that Stacy had been murdered. Because Glenn didn't want to touch anything in the home, Glenn quickly goes to a neighbor's house and calls 911. And then him and the neighbor both go back to the home, leaving Judy at the neighbor's home. Glenn and this neighbor, they go back and they wait on law enforcement. Law enforcement got here to the scene very quickly, and they noted in their report that they found no forced entry into the home. There was no murder weapon found at the scene, and the Dillon's landline phone was laying on the floor right near Stacy's body, meaning that he was either on the phone or he had just used the phone when he was murdered. Only one area in the house other than the crime scene area was really disturbed, and that was Stacy's closet. There was a shoebox in his closet that was dumped over. It didn't have any shoes in it. It had some like money, and there were some coins and some paperwork and all that kind of stuff in there. But the shoebox was dumped over like there had been something else in there that was taken from it. The following day after Stacy was found, his body was taken down to the coroner's office for an autopsy. And for whatever reason, the coroner at the time did a half-assed autopsy on him. In fact, he really didn't even do an autopsy. He just wrote down where his wound was. He didn't check for DNA or anything like that, which is irregular. Most of the time in these situations, an autopsy is the first thing they do, a full autopsy. Now, on a side note, at the time of Stacy's murder and this autopsy that wasn't done, the Cleveland Police Department here, they were in the middle of a federal investigation. And within 6 months of Stacy's murder, the chief of police resigned from his office. I don't know if this had anything to do with why the autopsy wasn't done, but I just thought that was an interesting tidbit that you should know. The neighbor who went with Glenn into the home would later tell police that he got a weird vibe from Glenn while they were inside of the home. He said that Glenn wouldn't walk into the room where Stacy's body was, and he told investigators that Glenn had actually said to him that because of their history, he had hoped they didn't suspect that he had done this, which early on propelled Glenn Darnell to the top of the suspect list. Although he initially appeared as a suspect, over the years, every time the case was reinvestigated, Glenn was always eventually ruled out. Now, knowing that Stacy had either been on the phone or that he had just hung up the phone when he was killed, law enforcement immediately went to the phone company to get those records. They learned that the very last call that Stacy made was to one of his friends named Jeff Brewer. It took them virtually no time to track down this Jeff Brewer, and Jeff told law enforcement that Stacy had called him and said to him that he was worried about something and he needed some advice. Jeff said that Stacy never got to tell him what he was worried about, because just after he said that to him on the phone, Stacy told him that a car had just pulled into his driveway, and he asked him if he could call him back. But Stacy never got the chance. At that time in 1991, the police did not release any other information than that. They said that they were going to keep everything else a secret until they solved the case. They told reporters that they did have a person of interest. They said they brought him into the police department for questioning, and that this person of interest quickly lawyered up, and because they didn't have any proof that he had done anything, they let him go. And no one was ever charged or arrested for Stacy's murder. Very quickly, Stacy's murder became a cold case. In the early 2000s, the police department took another look at the case, and again, nothing ever came of it. So Judy Dillon came out and publicly said that she felt like the police had botched her son's murder investigation, and that was why it was still unsolved, and that she was afraid it would remain unsolved. For nearly a decade after that, the case sat in a file cabinet somewhere, cold as ice, untouched. It wasn't until 2011 that the case was reopened again by a new team of detectives, and during that investigation, it was revealed that law enforcement believed the murder was committed by another male. They said that they believed Stacy was actually gay and that he had been in a relationship with another male, and that he tried to keep those parts of his life a secret because back then Cleveland was an extremely conservative town. They also made note that they believed that there were no signs of forced entry because Stacy knew his killer and he let them into his home. The new detectives on the case then said that in the original report, it was noted that this theory was investigated in the original stages of this case immediately after the murder, and that they went to Judy Dillon and asked her about it, and she denied that her son was gay, and they just kind of dropped it. These new detectives let it be known that in the original case notes, there was a confidential informant named Becky, and that was it. That was how they wrote it. Just Becky. No last name, nothing. And this Becky, she was the one who saw this person of interest near Stacy's home the night of the murder. But they had no other information to go by. They didn't even have a phone number. They had no way to track down this Becky to talk to her. So they ultimately reached out to the public here in Cleveland asking, if your name is Becky and you talked to law enforcement about Stacy Dillon's murder back in 1991, please come forward. And no one ever did. Finally, the detectives shared that they too had found a person of interest connected to Stacy's murder, and their investigation led them to the same exact person who was the person of interest back in 1991. In 2015, a TV show named Cold Justice, they aired an episode entitled Smoking Gun, and their reporters came here to Cleveland to talk about this case, and they publicly named this person of interest as Robert Houston. Robert Houston was a co-worker of Stacy's, and supposedly he was in a secret relationship with Stacy. They were secret lovers. This Robert also admitted to police that he saw Stacy the night he was murdered. During this TV show investigation, they ran into several people who talked about Stacy having a tape recorder and that he played with the tape recorder all the time. And they talked to several people who said that Stacy had told them he was going to use that tape recorder to catch someone who was evil. Well, this tape recorder was never found at the time of the murder. It's not been admitted into evidence. And one of Stacy's close friends told the detectives that Stacy kept the tape recorder in a shoebox in his closet.
Maybe his closet, a shoebox or something. I don't know for sure.
This proved that the early investigation into Stacy's murder was onto something when they suspected that something had been taken from that shoebox. And apparently this evil person that Stacy referred to knew that Stacy had some kind of audio recorded incriminating evidence against him, and he wound up killing Stacy over it. That way he could steal this recorder and no one could find out his secret. Finally, after all of these years, law enforcement had drummed up their motive for Stacy's death. Now they just had to find a killer. To this day, Stacy's murder remains unsolved. The TV show investigators and law enforcement believe 100% that Robert Houston killed Stacy Dillon to keep it a secret that they were in a secret relationship together. They believe that Stacy purposely recorded one of their conversations or interactions together to expose Robert to his parents, who vowed to disown him if he came out as gay. And ultimately, Robert Houston killed Stacy over this recorded interaction. The problem here is, though, they can't prove it. There isn't enough evidence for them to make an arrest in this case. So, if you know anything about the murder of Stacy Dillon, or if your name is Becky and you spoke with law enforcement back in 1991 about Robert Houston, please call the Cleveland Police Department and let's try to get Judy Dillon some closure here, finally, after all these years. That is going to do it for this episode today and the murder of Stacy Dillon from here in Cleveland, Tennessee. We are all wrapped up here, so we are heading back to Alabama. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I can't thank you guys enough. If you're new here, go down, hit that subscribe button, then hit that notification bell so you get notified every time I upload a video. If you're wanting to help support the channel, there's links down in the description box below you can check out. Thank you all. I will see you again tomorrow. Please, all of you, stay safe and stay healthy. Much love to you all.